Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Teacher Talks. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Holmes. While we are getting ready to start, make sure that you like, share, comment, subscribe, call your mama, call your sister, call your cousins, call everybody you know, let them know that Teacher Talks is on, and we are talking about STEM. Why does STEM matter? Especially for our young Black sisters. That's what we're talking about tonight. It's going to be a great conversation with Dr. Ansley Booker. I can't wait to have it with you. I will be back in 30 seconds. Remember, like, share, comment, subscribe. Teacher Talks is on. So thank you guys so much for joining me tonight on Teacher Talks. This is going to be a great conversation. I am definitely looking forward to it. Tonight we have a special guest, and that guest is Dr. Ansley Booker. She is a friend of mine, and she is going to talk to us about why STEM, not stems, that would be flowers, why STEM matters. So before we get into that, you know what we have to do. We've got to first chop it up because that's what we do all the time. So it is 9 o'clock somewhere. I hope that the kids are down because it's time for the adults to catch up. I hope that you have your handy dandy mug and your coffee cup ready. I don't know what you're drinking tonight. It's none of my business. I am drinking tea tonight, not coffee. So refreshing. It's been a long day. I've been on the road all day, so I'm kind of tired, but not too tired to have this conversation for you. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or if you're watching on LinkedIn, you can always share this with somebody. But the most important part is that you get into the comments and you chat with us because you drive the conversation for tonight's discussion. Remember, we are talking about STEM tonight, STEM education and why it matters. And we're talking about representation and why our young sisters need to be involved in STEM as well as our underrepresented communities. Great conversation we're going to have tonight. If you have not done so, if you're on YouTube, remember, subscribe right now. Stop what you're doing. Subscribe. Trying to get those subscribers up. I see people are already in the chat. You know what to do because you're telling me good evening. Remember, when you come to somebody's house, it's rude not to speak. So thank you for speaking. I see you, Jackson. I see you, Holmes. I see you, Gibson. I see you. Remember, if you're on Facebook, I'm always watching as well, making sure that when you drop comments in the box, I give you credit, I give you a shout out, and I recognize you for your participation in the conversation as well as your questions that many of you always have every time we do Teacher Talks. So without any further ado, I want to get started, and I see you, Miss Patterson. Hello to you. Good evening. I want to bring in my guest. You guys ready? You know, my people don't come in here like half stepping, right? When they come on Teacher Talks, they give it to you. They give you a little something, just a little taste, not too much, but just a little appetizer to let you know this is not a game. So let's bring in my guest, Dr. Ansley Booker. Welcome, Dr. Booker. Welcome.
Hello, how are you doing tonight?
Let me give you all the full view. There you go.
Let me give you the full view. You may know this ensemble by Dr. Holmes.
See, that bow tie is a Christopher Day original, straight from my custom accessories line that she's rocking. So if you like it and you want it, that's a whole nother reason to hit me up a little bit later on.
But another reason to get into it. Get into it.
She's looking good, y'all. She's looking good. She's killing it. She got to send me a picture that so I can post it as well.
Of course.
So, Dr. Booker, first of all, thank you for joining me tonight. Isn't it amazing how long I've actually known you?
I know. I feel like we like sister, brother, friends, cousins, right?
We really are. I mean, it's been over 10 years.
It's been over 10 years. Yes, I moved to Macon. Yep, about 10 years ago. That is right.
It seems like yesterday, but we met through a mutual friend, and we've been friends ever since. I remember y'all packed up in that little apartment, and we had some good times.
We're talking about communal living. I wish I could go back, okay?
It was cheaper.
Inflation is real.
Exactly, exactly.
The housing market is not what you want in 2021 right now.
Not right now. But since then, let's say you've done some wonderful things. We both have continued our education. You've gone on and gotten your Ph.D., and I've gone on and got mine. But I'm not going to talk about you. I'm going to let you do that. Tell
Oh,
them
no,
a little bit, give them a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and why you're such an expert in this field of STEM.
Yes, I mean, we have to talk about the academy. I think that's very much a part of the conversation that I definitely want to have with you tonight. So making sure that we acknowledge people, because representation and visibility does matter. So I definitely want to always highlight my friends that are doing great things in any industry, particularly education. My mother was an educator for over 40 years, and my aunt was an educator for over 30 years. So I definitely want to give them a shout out tonight, because again, education is really what's going to breed industry and innovation for the next several generations to come. And I think it's very important to talk about STEAM or STREAM education, depending on what letters you include there. But again, like Dr. Holmes said, my name is Dr. Ansley Booker. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. I am a director of diversity and inclusion at this very moment. But the reason that I am an expert or a scientista or a STEManista, as we like to say, is because I have my background in biology and chemistry, and then also regulatory affairs and clinical trials. And so I actually went to Georgia Southern University in Statesboro, Georgia, and the University of Georgia, respectively, for those degrees. And also in achieving my PhD in higher education leadership following being part of the McNair program at Georgia Southern University, what I noticed was that there was still a need for Black and Brown women in the discipline of science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And if you use the acronym STREAM, that's science, technology, robotics, engineering, arts, and mathematics. Even during my time at my PWIs, or predominantly white institutions, I often found that I was not the only female, I was one of very few females that were in these different departments and these scientific disciplines. And so that led me to write my dissertation. They tell you to write your dissertation on a topic that you love, that you're passionate about, that you feel can contribute to the academy or academia. And so I want to talk about that missing piece, that missing middle, like who was missing from that STEAM or STREAM platform. And again, like I said, that was Black and Brown people, particularly Black females and Black males in science disciplines, particularly those of computer science, physical sciences, and then also engineering. And so I definitely wanted to make sure that I was contributing to the academy and shedding a light on some of the barriers that those students had to overcome, barriers that the faculty had to overcome that were a part of the academy, and then also looking at some of the facilitators that were important to helping us overcome those barriers, so that I could actually make recommendations, which I work now in higher education, to make sure that we're strengthening that pipeline and we're not letting that talent that we see here in America go to waste, right?
So when we talk about representation, I think sometimes people don't understand what we're saying.
Yes.
So
okay.
You and I are just going to have a simple conversation about our schooling background, right?
Okay.
So my K-12 experience, I had one Black female science teacher.
Wow.
That's it.
Okay.
No male science teachers. I had no Black male science professors in my whole college experience except for one, and that was in this terminal degree I got from Georgia. Nobody in STEM at all. So when we talk about representation, that's my perspective. I didn't see anybody that looked like me in a STEM field.
That's right.
What about you?
And so I will say that I had a different experience. So one thing that I will say, that I'm from Eatonton, Georgia, and I don't mind saying that. I always want to shout out that, and that's where Alice Walker is from. That's where I'm from. But we got something right. And I don't know if it was that we were in a rural Georgia area and people value education. So therefore they went back and they taught in the communities in which they were from. But I had a little bit of a different experience. Actually K through 12, particularly in middle school, and I think this is why I actually am in STEM tonight, and I'll talk about these statistics a little bit later, is that was very much during that 7th and 8th grade year. I probably had 67 black female and Black male STEM teachers.
Wow.
And I don't want to call their names because I don't want to, forget anyone. And then by the time I got to high school, I did not have, and I'm thinking really, I had one Black male technology teacher. But again, that very critical part, that middle school where you have to decide if you're going to have a STEM identity or form a STEM identity, I actually had a lot of nurturing and encouraging Black, particularly Black female science teachers, right? And then my mother was an educator at home, and then my dad worked actually at Georgia Power, so he was actually in the STEM field. So I was surrounded in this little microcosm that I think was very unique. However, like you said, Chris, by the time I got to college, and particularly at these schools, you did not see professors in the academy that looked like you, whether they were Black females or Black males. So I had, in my entire undergraduate collegiate career, I had one Black male professor, right? And he literally was there for 6 months, and then he left and transferred to another school. I think in my entire collegiate career, undergrad, I probably had 2 to 3 Black female professors, and both of those individuals were in the biology department. So I did have some faculty that were Black female and that looked like me, but again, compared to the number of professors in the entire department, that was still very minimal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, and so when you're envisioning careers, you're thinking about what I'm going to do with this degree once I graduate. Again, you're thinking, okay, do I become a professor? Do I teach? Do I go back to the P12 level? Do I stay in higher education? If you can't be what you can't see, right? And that's why they say representation is so important, because you have this limited worldview, this limited view of what you can actually do within the discipline. Because again, no one's telling you about the diversity that's within STEM careers. And then if you don't see that within your own small little niche, if you don't go out and do an internship, or you don't have the opportunity to do networking, you'll never see those individuals that have excel in, engineering, mathematics, science, because they are there. They do exist. We have the history and the data to prove it. But again, sometimes those people are so far and few in between. And I think that's why it was so important that we highlighted the Black female doctor that contributed to the COVID-19 vaccine, because again, you don't see people that major in biochemistry, virology, because again, they're one and few in between. Sometimes you'll go your entire career and never having a STEM teacher. I'll give you another example. When I first started being an adjunct professor, one of my students first told me, and this was in 2016, she said, "Dr. Booker, you're the first Black female science teacher I've ever had."
Wow. So
you gotta to understand that this is so very real. And sometimes when you don't have people in the classroom that understand your particular background or understand some of the difficulties that you had to overcome, it makes the conversation on how I can actually help you and perpetuate, or propel you forward, not perpetuate, but propel you forward, right? Because you have to unpack so many different layers, because we're coming from 2 different cultural identities or cultural sets, right?
Right, most definitely. And so you've already given us the STEM acronym. All right, so science, technology, engineering, and math. I think people hear that, though. I think most laypersons still thinks science.
They do, yeah.
STEM does not include the other 3 for some reason. Engineering is making strong.
It's making a strong comeback. It's making a
strong comeback in terms of filling in those letters. But the technology part, with integration, and the mathematics part, which really oftentimes can build into the engineering, but it's its own separate thing as well. People don't make those connections. And I say that because when we think about students who are in programs in college, they don't all the time take advantage of being in that field or in that major, and all the internships, clubs, organizations that would really love to have them, and they could really broaden their experience in terms of what they could do when they graduate.
And again, like you mentioned earlier, and I'll try to keep my answers a little bit more concise here.
No, I want you to go.
STEM touches so many different aspects of industry, right? So what happens sometimes is that when we're in college, and I don't know if this is society or sometimes with our own internal thoughts, we put ourselves in boxes, right? So if I get a biology degree, that means I can only be a biology teacher. No, that's not true. There's so many things that you can do with a biology degree, right? If I'm an engineer, there's so many different types of mechanical, electrical, all these different things that are engineering. If you get a major in math, you can be a statistician. You know what I mean? You can do data analytics. You can do coding with IT. You do arts. You can do I'm thinking about like biomedical engineering. They need people to make prosthetics, right? And so that also includes arts because again, they need to be able to match up skin tones. And I can go on and on and on. You know, cosmetic chemistry. There's people that actually think about the compounds and the different chemicals that go into makeup and hair products, right? So you can't limit yourself because again, STEM is in every industry. And I always tell my students, you see STEM every day from the time you drive your car to the time you stop at a traffic light to the time you eat your meal for dinner or for lunch, right? Because there's chemistry even in food, right? And so you have to make sure that you don't limit yourself and you put yourself in a box because again, just because it doesn't look like your traditional scientist in a lab with a white coat or you've been a medical doctor or a traditional architect or engineer doesn't mean it's still not STEM related and that you still cannot benefit or make a contribution to society.
Most definitely. Now, as always, you know, the people do a great job of getting in the chat box. So let's go ahead and give credit to some of the things that are being said. First of all, good evening to Kizzy Lott, Catherine Ficklin, Candace.
Hi, friends.
So Candace says, most definitely, yes, we do put ourselves in a box. Kizzy had a question. Kizzy asked, how did you navigate the STEM world outside of academics?
How did I navigate the STEM world outside of academics? What I will say is that I've always prided myself on trying to be a holistic individual, right? So even while in high school and even in college, while I was taking STEM classes, biochemistry, study of diseases, emerging diseases, anthropology, ornithology, you know, all these different classes, I made sure that I also was in the communications department. I was also making sure that I was going into the English department. I was in honors English because I knew that even as a scientist, you still had to be able to have these transferable skills. We had to communicate. You had to be able to present your research. You had to make sure it was in layman's terms. Because even with research, as high level as it is may be in critical thinking, most times research, when you see a presentation or you see something in clinical trials, like I did with my master's program, we still have to write that on a 7th to 8th grade reading level because that is what the reading level is in America, right? And so I had to make sure that I was well-rounded in my approach because, again, I knew that there were very few people that looked like me and thought like me. So I knew that one of my best-selling skills when it comes to, like, you know, marketing yourself and selling yourself was going to be that communication, was going to be that base of having that written and oral language proficiency that I needed to propel not only my research forward, but again, some of the things that I wanted to do my career. So I made sure that I was involved in civic organizations. I made sure that I had social organizations that I was proud of. I pledged. I was a part of what I was a part of in undergrad. Now I'm just thinking like these different little clubs and modeling troops. I even worked. So I don't know how I had time to do it, but I even worked a part-time job. And I taught. I was a teaching assistant in the biology and chemistry department. So I tried to make sure that I didn't limit myself, I didn't let other people around me limit me. Because again, I graduated during a recession, so I really didn't know how to leverage my degree. But again, I was able to fall back on some of those other skills that I had cultivated, right, outside of the classroom to get a job and go then to graduate school.
And we're going to talk a lot about what you're doing now outside of academics with STEM a little bit later.
Okay.
You're doing a whole lot, and you're still working that STEM angle while doing something in higher ed, which I think is wonderful. Were you a part of NSBE when you were in undergrad?
No, I wasn't a part of NSBE because I wasn't an engineer. So that's the National Society of Black Engineers. So I was a part of biology societies and things of that nature, because I was a biology chemistry major, chem major.
So here's the thing, and I didn't know this probably until my junior year. Mm-hmm. NSBE is also for all applied science majors.
I did not know that either.
So my junior year, when I found that out, I joined it.
Yeah.
It really gave me a lot of opportunities that I had no clue about outside of. I was also a member of Beta. You know, the little, the
biology society. Okay, I see you. Shout out Beta. Look, try Beta.
And NSBE, I mean, wow. When I talk about internships, opportunities, summer programs, a lot of stuff that I wish I would have known more about when I was a freshman, but I didn't. But of course, we were all deep in our books, right, Kizzy? Freshman biochem majors, like you don't have time for anything else but to read and to study. Catherine also had a comment. Catherine says, especially with STEM specific career fairs, students don't know what they fit or that they fit the mold. They really don't. They really don't. I didn't.
Yeah. And I think that goes to, sometimes we as African Americans or Hispanic or Latino students or Indigenous students, we are so underrepresented in these fields and so further marginalized that sometimes we tend to not understand and you have to get outside of our own thought. We suffer from imposter syndrome, a stereotype threat, right? And so with that being said, we don't think that we're actually really, truly, we're like the cream of the crop because everyone wants to, especially now in 2021 with diversity and inclusion and equity being so high on the talking points, we really want to diversify the STEM field. So recruiters will intentionally go to graduate fairs and colleges to recruit from your NSBE, from your Society of Women Engineers, like your SWEs, your Tri Betas, where there's a market or a niche. So you actually have something special and you can actually use that to your advantage and really set your career, set your salary, set your hours, because again, these companies, they need you not only necessarily for your what you bring to the table in terms of your gender or maybe your race, your ethnicity, but also because you're diversifying and you're helping them to inform their consumer base as a whole, right?
Yes.
And so they want to make sure that they're being very diverse and that they're making sure that they're meeting their consumers. And so they want to bring that diversity to the table. I know that Catherine does a lot of that in terms of intentionally recruiting underrepresented minorities, women, especially Black and Indigenous people of color when she comes to Mercer University and other campuses, because again, you can't lead innovation when you don't have a diverse group of people at the table, right? And we can talk about so many companies that have missed the mark because you can only assume that there was not a diverse group of people making a decision when it comes to marketing or communication or a product, because you did not think that this would necessarily impact the consumer like it did. Because guess what? When you had the product, you didn't allow for diverse conversation and diverse ideas to flow, right? And we don't want to, talk about that because it'll take us a whole different tangent.
I know we need to sit down for dinner for that one because
yeah, we could, yeah.
So let's talk about this. Why should schools promote STEM? And then we'll talk about why they're not doing it.
Okay. So I want to read you this really quick quote. It says this, it said, when our schools become more gender fair, education will improve for all students, boys as well as girls, because excellence in education cannot be achieved without equity in education. And that came from how schools shortchange girls, right? And so what I will say that, coming from, like I told you, a rural background, I think it's very important that we not only focused on gender equity, but we also focus on access. Because oftentimes what I saw in my research, even when I experienced myself, is that if you don't have access to the latest books, technology, clubs, internships, networking, resources, highly competent teachers, right? Then you can't proceed or you can't continue to move that, not even that one person, but even that community or school district to the next level, right? Because again, you're stuck because you don't have access to your pre-calculus. You don't have access to your dual enrollment. You don't have access to your ESOL program, where you may have some very talented students, but maybe English is not their first language. You don't have access to, like I will say that we were blessed, even though we were kind of a little bit behind in my school system at the time, because we only had honors classes, but the nearest college was Georgia College. But what I will say is that our teachers were awesome, because a lot of our teachers, they also taught at Georgia College. So even though I was in a regular anatomy physiology class, I was still being taught by someone that also taught at night at Georgia College. So I was still getting this dual enrollment experience without the label, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I'm so glad when I see students that take advantage of these dual language, not dual language, that's another research project I did. These dual enrollment classes, I'm so excited when I see these STEM certified schools or these STEM or theme-based schools that start to integrate STEM at kindergarten and first and second and third grade, because what research has shown us is that you have to cultivate this STEM identity by second and third grade. I know that sounds crazy because we're always asking kids, like, what do we want to do and what they want for a career, but you have to start integrating that. I never forget I did a career fair, and not knocking any careers, but the students, because they had never been exposed, they had very limited knowledge of what particular careers they could have. They named, like, every student, I know they do the copycat thing too at that age, but they literally named like 2 or 3 things, because guess what? They had never seen anyone in their community that was a pharmacist, anyone in their community that was an orthodontist or obstetrician, and especially not a Black one, you know what I mean? Especially if you go in these inner cities, in these rural areas. So I think you have to introduce students, whether it's through books, whether it's through doing, like, you can, now with things being virtual, you can do virtual story times, you can do virtual career day. I've seen even here on my Facebook recently that a lot of schools are doing that now, having virtual days where they have someone that's in the lab and they're coming and they're talking to the students because they're in this particular profession that students need to know about. But I think you also have to make sure that schools also make the connection, not only between higher education and post-secondary education, but they also make the connection between your degree in like your amount of income and your social economic status, right? Because what a lot of people don't know is that STEM degrees have some of the greatest salaries, right?
Yeah.
You know, six and seven figure salaries, again, coming out of college with a bachelor's degree, especially some of these engineering, these, you know, now some of the other disciplines, you know, you have to go to school, get a graduate degree before you get to those figures. But I think you have to make that connection for students and make it more tangible, because sometimes for our students, they see things in short-term goals versus long-term goals. Mm-hmm. And of course, I used to always talk to my students when I was teaching back in the day about SMART goals. You know, what are our SMART goals want to be? Like, what, not only what do you want to be, but instead of having a job, I want you to have a career, right? And think about how your career can help not only set you up for generational wealth, but you can also be an active and contributing member to society, right? So I think, you know, exposing students to these things as early as you can. I did a lot of research on dual language immersion. They're teaching kids a second language in pre-K. Yeah. Right. So if you can do that with a second language, imagine what you could do with STEM education if you have an additional block for STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And I'm not saying that everybody's going to be an engineer, everybody's going to be a mathematician, everybody's going to be a scientist, because that may not be your niche, right? But again, I think sometimes we never know because the seed is not watered, right? We never cultivate it. We never offer it to them. We never exposed it to them. So their cultural capital is limited because they never got the access to go to the you know, like the Museum of Arts and Sciences. They never had the virtual, you know, gaming truck come to their school and explain that you can actually be a gamer or a coder, and this is a very lucrative career in 2021. No one ever explained to them that they could actually learn how to code and write software for different movies and cybersecurity, and how that's a top, you know, trending career. I know this stuff not only because I was in it, but then I also look at the Georgia Department of Labor Statistics, or the top 20, top 10 careers. And I think that these students are introduced to it, at least what I have noticed here in Bibb County, through the CTAE program sometimes, right? And so again, I think exposure and access is one of the biggest things that we definitely need to do in our schools, and basically dismantle a lot of the gender norms and stereotypes. Yeah. I remember I met a girl, she was in Houston County, and she was a welder. Wow. And when she told me how much money she was potentially gonna make just graduating from high school, I was like, maybe I should have did welding. You know what I mean? Again, because that's important. And you can't allow these students to be bullied or to, you know, be pushed out of the pipeline because of racism, sexism, your own implicit bias, you know, homophobia, you know, xenophobia, you know what I mean? Because again, if you want to, you know, strengthen America, strengthen the economy, and help to get people out of poverty, then you have to make the connection between careers, generational wealth, and sustainability, if that makes sense.
Oh my God, you hit so many things I want to comment on. So one, when we talk about STEM education, I think one of the most critical things that many schools don't realize is that those involved in STEM related activities requires a different level of thinking.
It does, critical thinking.
Yeah. That
reasoning, those math problems you hate. When you had to read, Johnny had 8 apples. No, that's critical thinking.
Right. They don't see it that way, but that enhances the student's ability to think critically and answer all types of complicated issues and problems because they were involved in that type of activity, especially early on. Kizzy she commented earlier, like even in preschool, yes, as early as preschool.
As early as preschool, yeah. Because let me, it's so crazy because when I think back on my experience, and this is the stuff you got to think about, you know, when you get older and I guess your grades start coming, you start reflecting on like your education and your experiences, right? At least that's what I do in my spare time. So, you know, I had a great grandma. So we didn't have daycare when I was growing up, right? You stayed at grandma and great grandma's house, right? And so I had older cousins. With that being said, my great grandmother was my first teacher, right? So kindergarten, first grade until I went to Head Start, right? So those formative years, 6 years old, we watched Sesame Street, right? We watched Magic School Bus, and then we had to watch Victor Newman on the stories, but that's not the point. That's not the point. But what I will say is that she made sure that we, quote unquote, with her limited third grade education, played school. Because listen, a third grade education is still not a 6-year-old, right? So she made sure she taught me how to write my name, how to do my numbers. We did what you would consider to be, what's the study of plants? I can't think of it right now. Botany. Yes, we did botany because she had plants all over her house and she told me about all the plants. I got a bunch of plants in my house now, right? Because of that, right? So that's botany. We didn't know that's what I was learning, but I was, right? We talked about agriculture because she had a small farm in the back of their house with some acres of land. We talked about water and soil erosion, all of these things that I was actually getting this informal education or informal STEM education. And I was like, I learned so much from my great grandmother, even at 4, 5, and 6 years old. There was a well. So we talked about temperature when I would go to the well to get water. And I'm thinking we're just having a conversation. But guess what? When I reflected on it as an adult, I was learning.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to school and I was conversant, talking to other 6 and 7 years old about the weather and precipitation and it was going to rain because I got aches in my knees, they were like, what is really going on? But I got that from my great grandmother through informal education, right? And so I think so much is lost sometimes with that gap, because in that very early gap, you can really mold, because your synapses are developing so fast in that window. You can teach a child a second language. You can teach them so much. My mother made sure every summer we had a library card. Every summer we took swimming lessons. There was always something that she made sure we were doing. We were never just like idle kids. And so much so that my dad would be like, Ansley, every time the bus rolls, you can't get on it. And I was like, what do you mean? Y'all have conditioned me to believe that, right? I'm on the math league, and when I'm in 6th grade, I'm on the science team, but I also was a cheerleader and played basketball and ran track. So they made sure that I was well-rounded. So yes, all of that.
Let me just say this, because I'm a big parent advocate. That's one of the biggest things I love to talk about when it comes to education and ed policy, is parents really being involved and being accountable for their children in school. And so what you just said is this: you don't have to come from $1 million mansion.
You do not.
In order to give your kids learning experiences, you simply have to use what you have
and invest in time. The key part of this equation, we're going to do like a math equation, is guess what? Time and quality time. Making sure that you're not in the part of this generation where you're just giving your child an iPad or a movie. If you are giving them an iPad or a movie, make sure it's educational, right? So we were going to watch TV. Guess what I said we watched? We watched Sesame Street. That was learning. If we were going to watch, when I was little, I was fascinated by Bill Nye the Science Guy. I love Bill Nye the Science Guy. I love Carmen Sandiego. Carmen Sandiego, guess what it was? Geography. I didn't know it, but they made sure that we were going to watch something. It wasn't just mindless TV. It was something that is going to keep us thinking.
Right. And when you got to school, although you didn't know you were learning then, you were able to connect what your teacher was saying to what you were experiencing when you were younger. And that's the power of it. You had some level of context to bring in those standards and content from school. That's all we're saying here, people. And STEM does it. One of the best things about STEM is it is so hands-on, what you're doing, project, problem-based, and it's all integrated with all the other content at the same time. But it's real-world issues that kids are trying to engage themselves in and solve. All right, let's go to a question. Kizzy had a question. She says, what is your suggestion for gaining students' interest in STEAM when they don't have examples that look like them?
Okay, so for me, one of the things that I make sure that I follow is books and movies, right? And that actually going to speed me up to something I wanted to share earlier, right? So one of the things, like students, if they don't see teachers or professors that look like them, I kind of already alluded to this virtual career fair that you can now have, where you can bring in people like myself, use your network and leverage that opportunity, right? Because now since you can connect with anybody from all over the world now, because of this Zoom technology or these integrated classrooms, and most of our schools now are equipped with these smart boards, smart tablets, right? Have students, what I used to have my students to do at Bound, I used to make them do presentations, right, on historical Black figures that were in STEAM or STEAM activities, right? We went from everybody from, now I can't think of Henrietta Lacks all the way to Daly, right? Because I want them to understand Garrett Morgan. They had to do, talk about Carver. They had to do these presentations that gets presentation skills. Even though they don't know these figures, some of these people are gone and passed away, they can still talk about their legacy, right? They can see the connection. They can talk about the careers and all the scientific advancements that these people have made, even during controversial times. I had my students to do a project on HeLa cells. They did a project on the Tuskegee experiment. Most people did not even know the Tuskegee experiment was until they got into my classroom, right? Then guess what I did? I connected that to COVID.
Yeah.
How people were afraid to take the vaccination, right? And then we had a whole conversation on healthcare disparities, but that's another topic. So again, you have to look for ways to interconnect things too. Now, if you want to have them to do, book research, you can. Watching movies, I also try to be fun sometimes. So, we tried to watch like Raising Dion. That's a STEM-based series that was on Netflix. I hope it comes back for a second season. We watched Hidden Figures to death. You know why? Because that was Dr. Booker's dissertation, right? Wrinkle in Time. They remade that with Oprah Winfrey. That talks about physics, right? And space-time continuum, right? We talked about Black Panther. Shuri is going to do a great job talking about women in STEM and showing like the globalization of and then Afrofuturism in Africa and what Wakanda could look like and how these cities are really being built in Africa. That's a whole nother lesson plan, right? We talked about See You Tomorrow. I don't know if you've seen that. That's not only about police brutality, but it talked about science and space and mathematics and coding. This girl had built her own basically time machine to go back and save her brother from police brutality. So you can have so many conversations, you know what I mean, about this. If you have an adult classroom, you can look at Lovecraft Country. That had such a STEM into it. There's so many ways to integrate these things into the curriculum. You just have to sit down and think about it. And if you don't know, go and get someone who's been in the profession and have them to help you to write out curriculum. Like 4-H now has so much curriculum that you can do online in your home and get the virtual STEM kits and boxes. STEM NOLA is a great program out of New Orleans that is done by Dr. Calvin Mackey. Well, they actually have a bus and that will come to your school or your university and do hands-on projects and learning experiments with your students. I can go on and on. Fort Valley State University has an extension program. They have like an agricultural and different technology things. Mercer has a lot of different, connections. They do Mercer on a Mission. So there's opportunities. You just have to see or sit down and think about how to integrate these things into your classroom and how to bring students. I always tell my students, to make sure they give back. And one of the ways they do give back, especially the NSB's chapter students here, the SWE students here, they do volunteer. They do hands-on science experiments with the local classrooms. So those are just a few things that I wanted to point out there too.
No, and what you said is, and this is so true. And I used to say this all the time when I was in the classroom. When I left the classroom and I supported, science across the district, that science is literally everywhere. All you have to do is just pull it out. It's in TV shows, movies, it's in songs, it's videos, it's everywhere. All you have to do is pull it out and then use it and go with it. That's all you have to do.
Because music is math. If you can get a student to understand music, then you can teach them about math with the measures and the meters, right? Yeah. That's not how I could learn math. I learned math because my mom realized I could calculate really fast. So my mom taught me fractions and percentages. She was like, Ansley, tell me how much I'm going to pay on this percentage if I get this dress or this. We were in this like Belk and Sears. And so I was like, it was a game that I would try to figure out how much she was going to spend. We still play it to this day, but that's how I learned fractions. You know what I mean? That's how I learned timetables and percentages, right? So things such as simple as that. Whenever I have nieces and nephews and goddaughters and things of that nature, I always get them educational toys. I had a VTech, Leapfrog, learning pads. There's so much out there now, free downloadable curriculum for teachers, teachers who pay teachers, right? Real impact, summer camps like that, 4-H. I was involved in all of that stuff. Lego League, Robotics League. I did all that too. So again, just looking for opportunities. And sometimes these things are free. If not, maybe you can get some scholarships for our students.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go back to one of the comments that Catherine had, and she had a question as well. She asked, was the occupational outlook handbook still around? And the answer to that is yes.
It is still around. Yep, you can get a digital copy now.
Recently, and I actually shared it out with some students. So yeah, but she said that that book helped make the decision of what she wanted to do in life.
Yeah, because you see that correlation between education and salary, right? Yeah. And you see like the statistical trend from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree to a Ph.D., et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, again, you can also see that even with 2-year degrees. Like I mentioned, the girl that did the welding, right? Or people that do barbering. They still can have great, salary in those careers as well. But again, if you don't have something like Catherine said, this Outlook handbook, and you don't, because, gone are the days where you have a career coach or a career counselor. Now, when I was in high school, we had that. But because of budget cuts and constraints or, things of that nature, we won't get into that conversation. A lot of the onus is put back on the parents and the students, right? And so, again, sometimes, students may not know what the opportunities, or they may not know what the handbook or the worksheet or the page. But again, programs like I said, TRIO, Upward Bound, ETS, about math and science, where they do talk about higher education, they do talk about careers, and they do have intentional activities for students where they do like worksheets, and they talk about what is your career, what classes do I need to take, what college am I going to, what is my SAT score, ACT score, and then they make that correlation. And again, even like myself, there's nothing wrong with even pivoting or even changing your career, but making sure that you are having a plan and you're mapping it out. It's career mapping, right?
Yeah.
And I wish that I know my brother got a chance to take advantage of the in my hometown, there's Central Georgia Technical College. My brother got a chance to take advantage of the I forgot what it was called when he was in college. It was so high school, that was so long ago. But basically, it was like when we were in school, we got like the dual seal, right? Vocational and college prep. But he got an endorsement from the CGTC where he could have actually started working in, I forget what his field was, and could work while he was going to college. It was like a work ready program was what it was called, right? So you have to take advantage of some of those programs like that. And even some of your community-based programs, like, the work ready programs. I know Mr. Roger Jackson does a great program with the Motivating Youth Foundation. So there's a lot of different programs, even in our community, that try to make that connection for students. They don't drop out, because dropping out is another big issue that we have to deal with in our community too, as well as our literacy rates as well.
Yeah. And then even for those that don't drop out, there's still a strong correlation between poor high school education and transitioning and graduating with a 4-year degree.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, that's a whole other conversation. Candace Davy commented on your quality time comment about your grandmother and your mother. She says, yes, use what you have. Quality time is key. Ms. Colbert comes in and she says, my grandmother had a well. You guys live in the country. A garden, pigs, and chickens, and we chop wood for the fireplace. We were taught a lot as children every summer. Those experiences. So parents, get your kids out of the house and let them go do something besides play games and watch TV all day long.
And that's important. Yeah, I agree. And my great granddaddy, because I was living with my great grandparent, not living with, but like I said, that was daycare. My great grandfather taught us entrepreneurship. Now we didn't know that's what it was, but he was teaching us, right? Because we had a pecan tree, right? And we had some other fruit bearing trees. So he was like, in the summer, if you guys go pick X amount of trees, then I'm going to give you X amount of money. Right. And so he had like a little savings account, and he would help us to write it down. So that's that's math. That's checks and balances. That's entrepreneurship. We have like a little business. Right. So there's numerous ways in which you can engage your students, your kids like that way too.
So tell me this. So give me 2 things you think that causes schools not to engage in STEM programs. And I'm not saying STEM programs like, your STEM school. I mean, just one activity a month or one STEM day a year. What is this resistance?
And the thing about it is, sometimes I think it's resistance, but you have to go by individual schools and school districts, right? Sometimes I think it is time and money. And we know that those are the 2 things that hold us back from doing a lot of things, even us achieving our individual dreams, right? So again, schools sometimes, depending on what the schools are, they're so, and I don't work in a P-12 setting, so I have to keep it in a higher education, mind for like a, thing. But again, it's the resources. Sometimes you don't have the human resource, which is a professor or a teacher. And then sometimes you don't have the capital, which is the money, to go out and get, the additional resources or the STEM kits or the trucks. And so a lot of times, depending on if it's an inner city school where the budgeting and funding is not what it needs to be, you're relying on your community volunteers or your students that want to get some additional community service hours and to lead those programs. You know what I mean? And teachers do a lot, particularly during this COVID-19 pandemic. You're leveraging not only the kids in your classroom, you're doing virtual learning, you're trying to keep kids on pace with curriculum. There's so many things that before you can even get to the STEM, you got to kind of tackle with your own individual school or school district, right? And classroom. And sometimes that's a luxury and within a privilege within it, even within itself, if that makes sense. So I think the biggest 2 things are time and money, capital, resources.
And I'm going to add
a public school and not a private school.
Yeah, I'm going to add 3 things to that. 1, they think it's something different. So it's going to be in addition to what they already have in place. Because if, depending on the kind of school you're in, there's a lot of pressure that you need to improve student outcomes, right? And so I really don't want to focus on anything new. I want to just keep doing what I'm doing. Number two, I think sometimes they feel like they don't have the human capital to really do the work. And that's true. You have to have the right people in place in order to have a true STEM program. But if not, you can always implement a few STEM activities throughout the year. So don't get caught up in trying to do the STEM certification, be a STEM school. Just engage the kids in the STEM activities. That'll help you out a lot. And number three, depending on where you're located, and you spoke to this earlier, some people feel like they don't have the resources outside of the school to supplement what needs to really happen to do STEM. But you just said, use what you have.
Yeah. And I will say too, and this is a plug for Real Impact, because I know if people are not familiar with Real Impact, that is a nonprofit here in Middle Georgia where we target 3rd through 8th grade girls, right? And so now we're trying to expand our base, and so we're actually doing a partnership with Sirius Academy. I think they had the very first day earlier this month, and we're going to have some more days to come. So again, that's another opportunity where you see a strategic partnership, where you see a need in the community. You see a school, and so now the teachers don't have to overextend themselves more than what they already are, because you're having a community-based resource that's going to come in and bring in the teachers, bring in the volunteers, and they're going to do extended hands-on activities from everything from science, technology, reading, engineering, arts, and mathematics, all within that school day, right? Mm-hmm. And then students are going to be able to take away a tangible product at the end, depending on if it's a drone day, or if it's, we might do something else, like we might do fashion, it just depends on what that camp is. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So if you have a comment or question right now, go ahead and put it in the comment section. Remember, if you're on YouTube, like, comment, share, and the most important thing I need you to do is to subscribe. Even if you're not on YouTube, go to YouTube right now. Fully engaged education.
I'm a YouTube subscriber. Subscribe. Hit my button below. Where is it? Can we say?
Click that bell. Subscribe and click that bell. Get those notifications.
Yeah.
So guys, I thank you guys so much for being here, because you guys are asking great questions. So let's keep going. We're gonna give you guys maybe 10, 15 more minutes of this, okay? But if you have questions or comments, I welcome you to put them in the comments on any platform that you're streaming from. Yeah. So when we think about global, and I do want to say that again, STEM, stream is a global thought process, programming, activity-based implementation that's interwoven into every field just about. So when we think about trends in those areas, what do you see happening right now in STEM, STEAM, or stream?
Okay. So what you see happening right now, and I'm looking at some statistics that I had pulled up, because of course my dissertation was so long ago, I don't have the numbers at the top of my head like I used to. You see this global competition, right? This was kind of alluded to in Hidden Figures if you watched the movie, read the book, right? Mm-hmm. Where you see there's a race, right, to the last frontier, and that may be space or whatever it may be. And so you see China actually is producing 4.7 million STEM graduates every year. India, 2.6 million. United States, only a little bit over 500,000. And if you look at the number of that 500,000 that are STEM graduates, the percentages are usually less than 1%, less than 2% that are Black and Indigenous people of color. And then same thing for that of women. Russia, same thing. And then India, Indonesia. And again, we know that these jobs in the next few years are going to be in STEAM activities, like the computer sciences, the engineering, the coding, the mathematics. We've already talked about this. And so the issue is that globally, this is an issue or concern as well, because you see how these people and these industrialized nations trying to globally compete to see who's going to be the next basically superpower or be able to produce the next commodity. And again, a country's greatest commodity or greatest talent is its people, right? And so even with STEAM or stream, you see that you have a lot of people that are foreign born that are coming to the U.S. to get educations or even jobs in stream, right? And so what you have to make sure is that we're cultivating the talent that we have here, these untapped resources, right? And so again, like I said, the women and the men that are Black, Latino, Latinx are far and few in between in these occupations, particularly those that are computer science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Those where the jobs are. So again, you see that greater disconnect. And then you also see this disproportionate amount of us that are dropping out each year. So if you look at the STEM pipeline, if you start, like, let's say we get them in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, by the time they get to middle school, you lost half.
Wow.
By the time they get to high school, you lost another fourth. So by the time they actually graduate and go into college, you probably have 10 people where you started with 900, right?
Even
And so
some
you
people aren't even majoring in STEM films anymore. They've gone on to something else, like psychology.
Something else. Maybe they changed their major. Maybe they're no longer interested. Maybe they no longer think it's cool. Maybe they don't think it's profitable. Maybe they had these weed out courses where they felt that they weren't intelligent enough, or they weren't academically prepared to continue, to continue the rigor of a STEAM education. So you have to it's almost you have to duck and dodge bullets at every corner, at every turn, in order just to graduate. And then you have to deal with these same issues of racism, sexism, tokenism, xenophobia, isolation, gender and pay disparities, even once you graduate. And the same thing is not only happening here, it's happening globally. I recently this year, I did the India Science Festival. So what they're dealing with in India, which I mentioned, I think they were like number 3 or 4 on the list, but I told you about the number of production of STEM graduates, is that they're having to tackle their caste system. So they know that people are put in a caste system based upon their social economic status, right? So if you're a lawyer, doctor, then you're here, right? If you're a part of this bottom class, this lower class, sometimes known as the untouchables, you're here. And you cannot really move out of within your caste system, right? And so what they're finding is that they don't have enough people to have, compete and hold their jobs, because they put people in this structured system and they can't elevate or move within their system, right? Same thing was happening. I did a presentation for Golden Key, my dissertation, in South Africa. They're dealing with the same issues. I don't think South Africa was on the list that I gave you. But again, trying to have more industrial, Africa is a continent, but within certain countries, in Africa, trying to become more industrialized, or trying to increase entrepreneurship and innovation and things of these, so that these different communities and countries become self-sufficient and self-reliant, because they already have the capital, the people, and the natural resources, and now trying to put them together with education, right? They were dealing with the same issues we were dealing with. A lot of things they were dealing with were gender issues, right? If women could be educated, and if women could be educated, how far past first, second, third, even, middle school could they be educated, right? So if you take someone out of the education pipeline at middle school, of course you're going to see a deficit when you get to college in their careers, because you took half of the population out. Usually any country, women going to be about half or a little bit more than half of the population, right? And so I actually interviewed this individual. She was from Nigeria, but she moved to Canada for a job because she had issues and concerns in Nigeria with trying to be an engineer. And she literally described going to school. I think she went to like a boarding prep school when she was in Nigeria, of going through these classes being the only girl as a war zone. Wow. She felt attacked. She said people would basically, be very cruel, physical abuse, mental abuse, how they would talk down to her, say, you will never be an engineer. Women aren't this. Women can't do that. Women belong X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's a global issue, right? And I think the winners are going to be the country that figures out how to tap into this reservoir of people, this reservoir of talent that is not being utilized, right? Yeah. Those are going to be the people that win. But we got to remove so many barriers, like I said, the access issues, the segregation in our public schools sometimes, the lack of resources, the lack of time, it's so many financial hardships, weed out courses, racism, bias, all these things. We got to remove all of these barriers in order for us to even be successful and make sure that these individuals are successful. And so that's why when you get to college, we specifically have these affinity groups like NSBE, SWE, Tri Beta, the Black Society of Women Chemists and Scientists, all these affinity groups and resource groups to try to help support and make sure that we provide a sense of security and familiarity and mentors and networking so that these individuals can be successful.
And that's key. I think what has to happen is that when these students get into the secondary, post-secondary realm, they have to know that these organizations exist and join.
Look, and be a contributing member.
Most definitely, they have to join. And I don't think that, I think sometimes there's a fear, and we're not going to talk. I'm just going to drop this nugget, and we're not going to talk about it. But I think sometimes there's a fear to connect yourself with something that is racially or gender specific, because you don't want people to think certain things about you. So you don't want to be a part of the National Society of Black Engineers or the Women Chemist Society or things like that. Who cares? It's your time to be selfish. Do what you have to do. But it's funny that as you talk about these trends, the same people that alienated a lot of us now realize they need us in order to be competitive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They need us. And so they're trying to open up doors, but you've embedded certain beliefs in these students' minds that they can't do this kind of work.
Yeah. And this stuff has been going on, you know, in my dissertation, I talk a lot even about the formation of historically Black colleges and universities and what degrees you could get when you were at those universities, right? And this is like post, you know, post Civil War, you know, when they first, those very early, like, you know, Wilberforce and Cheney, some of those very first HBCUs that they opened up, right? And so again, those schools were meant to be agricultural or mechanical, or you were meant to be taught to be an educator. The focus was never for the intention for you to be a scientist, a mathematician, for you to be a doctor, you know, or a lawyer, right? That type of education was reserved for the PWIs.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, and what people have to understand and realize, even in this country, most of the higher education schools, not even just in Georgia, but all across the United States of America, are only about 60 to 50 years from integration.
Most definitely.
That's only like one or two generations. You know what I mean? So with that being said, there's no way that we can realistically believe that you've removed all these negative issues that we not only had in the P through 12 environment with segregation and Jim Crow that we went through, and that they did not exist in higher education. And we've addressed, sutured them up and fixed them, right? Because now we have a lot of our institutions that are Hispanic serving, you know, they're minority serving, they have all these different designations based upon their student populations. But what additional resources are you providing these students to be successful, right? What are you doing for our first generation students, right? What are you doing for our Black and brown students? What are we doing for our Asian students to combat some of these imposter syndromes, these microaggressions that they're experiencing in the classroom? When professors look at them and say, oh, you'll never be an engineer, you'll never be a scientist, you'll never do this, you'll never do that. So what are we doing to combat that? And that's, again, where my job now comes in with this diversity and inclusion part, right? Because we talk about these implicit biases. You know, there was this viral campaign that went around, you know, what does a doctor look like, right? Because, again, even in society, people cannot even perceive sometimes a Black woman to even be a doctor, right? So remember that whole hashtag, what does a doctor look like? And you had a lot of these people that are doctors and very successful in their professions. They actually posted pictures like, no, I'm a doctor. This is what I do every day. Because, again, these issues are real. The whole issue with discrimination in education, segregation, that really hurt education in America.
Yeah.
And that could be a whole other conversation.
Oh, I would jump on that one. I would jump on it.
And even the resegregation now of the schools and how it's being done, particularly the public schools.
Most definitely. And we can get into charters as well. Now, we do got some great charters that serve Black students, but if we look at the data as it relates to charters and who they're serving, there's a whole other set of issues.
Conversation. But it's so, you know what I mean? It's so crazy because it's almost like you have to almost train for this marathon just to get a high school diploma. Then you got to run another Ironman to get like a college degree. And God forbid if you go on to get a graduate degree, it's almost as if you've been in like an Olympic decathlon or something like that. And so, and you know, by the time, and I think Catherine mentioned it too, by the time people get through with all this stuff and dealing also with the outside pressures that you're also dealing with, people are worn out and tired. And so again, that's when you see another where people actually leave the academy and they go to either careers or industry, or vice versa. They actually have these degrees and they just pivot all together. I know a lot of people with biology and chemistry degrees now that are doing something completely different.
It is a battle. It is a battle.
It is.
Then my first job as a chemist when I graduated from undergrad, I never felt welcomed, but they knew they needed me.
That's the inclusion part.
Yeah, I never felt like I was a part of that company at all. And I would go to work every day and literally not talk to anybody. I would work the station, work, and I would go home every day.
And that's so emotionally draining. That's like trauma in itself.
I mean, it got to the point when I drove in the parking lot, my anxiety built up because I didn't want to go in the building. That's how bad it was. So let's keep going a little bit. So we got two more questions I want to get to. So let's say STEM is not in a school. We have students in a community. They're not getting STEM in their schools. I want you to talk a little bit about what you do so you can expose kids to STEM education through your service, your nonprofit work that you do, your advocacy work. Let's talk a little bit about that.
So I do a lot of things as it relates to STEM because it is a passion of mine. I know that I know the struggles that a lot of Black and brown girls have gone through. So I try to make sure that I still reach back and do stuff with Trio, Upward Bound, being a part of that particular community. I do sit on the board of Real Impact, so I'm always advocating for real impact, making sure that girls will be women in STEM. So I'm definitely always trying to encourage people to be a part of that, either throughout the school year or even throughout the summer, our summer camps, our robotics league, Lego league. Trying to do a STEM festival. We were working with that with Real Impact. Did a STEM festival going there. And then also I did a lot with in Leadership Making 2019. One of the things we wanted to do was make an outside amphitheater at the Emogi National Indian Mounds. And so we actually were able to do an outdoor classroom. And so my team and I worked with some very wonderful, wonderful women. We pulled together 5 STEAM trunks. And so what we did, we made sure that within those STEAM trunks, they're portable trunks. So if a teacher takes their class there, for a project, they can actually do real outside experiments, everything from anatomy, physiology to math and coding. And so through a lot of incredible donations, we had books, story time. You could actually watch movies. We had movies and DVDs because we had a screen that you could pull up to watch movies and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that there was a connection between what students were learning in the classroom and then some physical, tangible exercises that they could do if they were able to go out to the Emogi National Indian Mounds and check out one of the stream boxes. In terms of curriculum and higher education, I tried to, and I can't say I tried, but I already did. I wrote some chapters and some books that help educators P through 16 to address some of the issues that we already mentioned. Try to lay out some actual action plans and curriculum development for classrooms or teachers that may not have access to these resources and things of that nature. So, just trying to make sure that I'm filling in as many holes and as many niches as I can. And one of the most important things that I do that costs me nothing other than my time that we've already talked about too is be a mentor. Yeah. So I have a lot of students, and even though I don't currently work in industry, I have a lot of students that I still mentor because guess what? I still made it through a master's degree program, right? Battling the same issues and concerns in societal issues that you already are trying to navigate now. So I always make sure I'm a mentor. I have a mentor. I have one at UGA, two at UGA, and then 2 here currently at Mercer. And all of them were matched with me because they were STEM. So anytime I can give a talk, a lecture, or I can do a dinner with them or a large group, things of that nature, I do that. And so now I do also have my business and consulting angle too that I do for STEM, and that can be, and I try to utilize that as much as possible as well.
So let's just say this. So students, if you're listening, parents, if you're listening, if your students aren't getting STEM, there are several avenues they can get access to STEM education, whether it be through programming, nonprofits, mentors. There's just so many ways you can get it, and it's out there. All you have to do is just do a little bit of research.
Simple Google search.
Google search it. It's out there. There are so many opportunities. Just like you, I do a lot of mentoring. I do a lot of nonprofit work as well. And I'm telling you, the programming is out there, and it's out there for people that look like you and I. So don't assume that people aren't pushing for it. They're not wanting your kids. Yeah. Even if you have a little girl, even Girl Scouts, if you go simple as that.
Girl Scouts, yeah, that's another great organization. 4-H too.
They do a lot of STEM. So it's out there. And if your schools aren't doing it, you can still get them involved, because what it does, it opens them up to so many new opportunities. And Catherine said it well. It's going to be hard, but it's worth it. A field in STEM is hard, but it is definitely worth it.
It's very rewarding. Very rewarding. I even sit now on some alumni boards, and so I'm trying to address some of the issues, like some of the systemic issues as it relates to higher education in STEM, and trying to patch up that pipeline. You know what I mean? Because it's going to take a lot of patching before we can actually retool and reshape and rebuild, right? And so a lot of that includes trying to make sure we have research funding so that we can attract diverse faculty, meaning trying to get more Black faculty, more Hispanic faculty. Because oftentimes what you'll see, we have a lot of white faculty, a lot of Asian faculty. We want to make sure that we're diversifying that, again, because you can't be what you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important that with these universities, if you have a large minority but global majority population, that you're trying to make sure that you have faculty and staff that look like them and there's representation there. So, you know, trying to address even some of those issues too are greatly needed. You have to tackle it from so many different angles. Different angles.
And I'll say this real quick.
Funding and scholarships is another big thing I try to advocate for. Well, they've donated money through the African American Alumni Network. I think Catherine's own Ken has done her and Ken have done a great job, and their predecessors have done a great job with that, making sure we have even funding for our students to even stay in school, which is a whole nother conversation, the financial hardships. You know, I do a lot of DE&I work too, trying to address some of the issues that you see in the classrooms and address the culture, the campus culture and the campus climate, right? Same thing for the workplace. Like you said, that was a major issue that probably should have been reported to HR because you were experiencing some real life trauma. So, you know, that's what that's where my consulting part comes in for a nonprofit or workplace, talking about inclusivity and like how to change the culture, right? And, you know, all this stuff is really big now in 2021 with DE&I and justice work. So, yeah.
Which I think is a great time, as you said earlier, it's a great time to be a young person going into a STEM field. The doors are open. The opportunities are.
The time is now.
The time is now. So take up space, people. Take up space because it's available for you. So last question. As a STEM advocate, what would you say to a student that is thinking about or possibly desires a career in a STEM field, but they don't know where they fit? What's your advice?
Sometimes you're not meant to fit, right? So if you aren't necessarily fitting in the culture, that doesn't necessarily mean, that doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with you. That means it could be something wrong with the environment. Because like you said, there was nothing wrong with you, Chris, as a chemist. There was something wrong with the environment. So with that being said, I don't want my students to internalize that oppression, right? So I've had very candid conversations with students and even myself as a student and as a working adult. You have to make sure that you are examining the environment as well. And don't be afraid to speak out and advocate for yourself when something is not right. Because just like you're paying tuition dollars, you're also going there to work and get a salary, and they're utilizing you. So make sure that you're reporting issues when you see bias, when you see racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, any of these things. Make sure that you're being an advocate for yourself, right? And then also make sure that you're challenging yourself. Make sure you get you a cohort, you get you a group of family and friends and support groups. Because again, the reason why I was successful in undergrad was because most of the biology department, not the chemistry department, but the biology department was Black women, and they were my line sisters. So we started our own little study group, right? We made our own little test banks and make sure we help to uplift and encourage each other, right? And to affirm each other, regardless of what society is saying about you being a STEM major. We're going to affirm you because there's no coincidence that we're all here at the same time. Right. We constantly look for scholarships together. We constantly share internships and networking advice with each other, right? We saw other role models. I'm not even gonna lie. Even at the University of Georgia, most of my role models were white men, and they were some of my biggest advocates. Even so much so, helping me to graduate, right? And then I also made sure that I turned around and I gave back even when I was in college and even now, right? I would also tell them too, if you don't see the career you want, imagine it, create it. Because there's a lot of times when you can get to college and you can actually combine and be a double, triple major and make your own career, right? And so I think that's also so very, very important. Even to my younger kids, like if you want to be just like you dress up to be Batman and Superman, dress up to be Dr. McStuffins, dress up to be so and so, dress up to be, Garrett Morgan, dress up to be Benjamin Banneker, right? And we have to start teaching our Black history in our homes. We have to make sure that's a part of the curriculum. Even though it's taken out of public schools, we got to reinvent it and re-invite it into our homes, right? Yeah. Kids cannot be lazy. There's time out for laziness, right? Because no one's giving out any kind of handouts at this point. So if you know that you are deficient in a subject area, then that's where you need to go and get tutoring. That's where you need to seek outside help. That's when you need to ask questions. Do not suffer in silence. I had to get my little smart self right over to the writing center. When I failed my little writing test, I was devastated. It was a blow to my ego. But guess what I did? I took my little self to the writing center, and you know what? I corrected my mistakes, and I learned from that, right? Also, make education and learning fun. That's what I always did. We made raps, we made songs, we had beats about like I'm like vibing now about amino acids and chains and like ornithology, getting up at 8 o'clock, going out with my professor in his truck looking at birds at 8 o'clock in the morning. We did some crazy stuff, right? But again, I was exposing myself. I was stepping outside of my comfort zone because I knew there was something that I wanted that was deeper and richer for me. And I knew that something was greater. There's this great quote that says, there's 2 days in your life that are just so phenomenal. The day that you're born and the day that you figure out why you were born. What's your purpose? What's your gift? And I never stop learning or trying to hone or cultivate that. Because again, I think your gift will make room for you. It will make any of the other issues that you are dealing with cease to exist and imagine. And for my parents, for my godparents, my community members, anybody that's pouring into a child, it does not have to be your own individual child. Continue to pour into them, continue to cultivate them, continue to affirm them, because students and even adults are dealing with so much right now. 2 pandemics, police brutality, you name it. And we have to make sure that we continue to fight and leave a struggle, because we have to be our own Superman. No one's coming to save us. If we want to build generational wealth and sustainability, we're going to have to figure it out and take advantage of the resources and opportunities that are not only presented in front of us, but then what we might hear about and learn about, and then give it to the next person, pass it on. Don't just take all this great knowledge and stuff that you're learning and keep it to yourself. Share it with someone else, right? And so again, I think those things are really good. Talk to other girls that are in STEM and science, and women and men. Talk to your counselors, find mentors. I think I already mentioned that. But it's so much stuff that you can do every day. And again, one of the biggest things I learned from my dissertation was that a lot of people that go on to tend to be successful have this one thing. And that one thing is, guess what? Intrinsic motivation.
That's it.
No one can teach you intrinsic motivation. Mm-hmm. It's within yourself. Mm-hmm. You can cultivate it, you can hone it, whatever, but you have to have that desire to succeed and to be successful.
And that belief, you got to believe it.
You got to believe in yourself.
You got to desire it. You said some great things, and so I want to leave with some of the things you said. I love when you said, parents, invite and create Black history in your homes.
Yeah.
Invite Black history in your home and allow your children to create Black history in the home. You have to make education and learning, that should say fun, not from, but make it shouldn't be a task. And I think sometimes it is so arduous for so many kids. They don't like it anymore because people don't make it fun. And then you said this, sometimes there's not a mold for you that you were meant to fit in, because you were meant to form your own.
You gotta form your own path. You know what I mean? And then if you do, look back and take someone else with you, because oftentimes I never knew how much of a role model I was even being in high school, right? Like, oh, that's a Black girl. She didn't win, and she was on the quiz bowl team. They just won a state championship. Then she went in, the duality of the intersection of me, that I was a person. She was in 4-H. I was, a summer camp. I did everything because guess what? I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this fun. I'm going to enjoy life, right? And I think so many people get bogged down by things they can't do and stuff they won't try.
Yeah. And so many people poured into you. The things you were doing, you never thought would happen. You were wondering why other people weren't doing the things. You're like, what's wrong with y'all? Get involved. This is fun. They're like
y'all not counting chickens. Y'all not picking pecans. Y'all don't have a jug of water outside in the summertime. Have to be out there all day.
Y'all not watching the stories?
Yeah. You're not doing that, because it's funny, because, and I will say this, and shout out to my parents, they never stopped me from being different, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially like a little Black girl, like I used to come up with some stuff. I ain't even gonna lie. I used to come up with some stuff, because I never forget one time my dad was into animals and I was too. And so I had rescued some baby birds. And so I brought them in the house. And so I knew from watching something that you had to put birds in a light, like a heat lamp. Mm-hmm. So I was literally like trying to hatch these bird eggs in like my dresser. Like, my mom didn't get mad at me. We talked about the science behind it, and she's like, Ansley, and this is gonna happen, and blah, 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 blah. So again, even for our parents, if don't stop your children from being different. They want to play with Legos and trucks and toys and erector sets, buy it. My mama bought me all type of stuff from the Sears catalog. I had geology labs, I had rocks. That's probably why I passed geology in college, because of that little 5th grade kid I had. I was growing tadpoles. My dad bought me a turtle when I was in high school, took it to college. Like all kinds of stuff. They kind of poured into me, and they allowed me to be different and allowed me to be myself.
And I do have one little story, one country story that
Oh, country store. Here it is.
country story because my mom was from the country, right? And so
Okay.
every summer she would send us all four kids to the country, and we
Okay.
would literally be outside all day. Couldn't go in,
With water?
couldn't go in and out that door with, and we had to, my grandmother would bring
Close
water.
my screen door. Close my screen door.
Right,
My screen door.
and there was no AC in the house, just the ones in the window, no central AC, but they had horses and mules and my uncle farmed. But I never forget, my uncle was a rabbit hunter.
Okay.
And I had always loved science. I had always said I wanted to be a doctor, right? And so I was not grossed out by blood or death or anything.
Me either.
So he killed these rabbits, right?
Uh-huh.
So I was like, well, what are you going to do with all the things you took out? This is the young scientists think I'm a doctor, right?
Yeah.
He's like, we're going to just, clean them out and throw it away. I said, no. I said, well, can I take the hearts?
Oh, wow.
He let me take 12 rabbit hearts. They let me put them in the freezer until I left that summer. I took those rabbit hearts home and I gave them to my science teacher that next grade level. Now, she was definitely out of order, but she let me those 12 rabbit hearts. We had I was all into the ventricles and aortas. And I was like all in those rabbit hearts. And I was nerding out, like for real. And all my friends were like, this is cool. But like, dude, you kept rabbit hearts all summer. I was like,
all summer in your freezer. Look, it's two things. So that reminds me of two things that happened. I know we got to get off. So when I was little, I was just like you too, right? And so we used to, like I said, at my grandma's house, we had like the little baby chicks, right? Mm-hmm. And so I never forget. I went in the house with the little chick, right? And I was like, oh, it broke his leg. So somehow or another, probably in the stories with my grandma, I had saw that you could make a splint, right? So I done ate a popsicle and wrapped this little chick's leg up with a popsicle. My mom and grandma like, take the thing out that thing, take the thing out that chicken for before you kill it. You know what I mean? So, like I said, that curiosity and just doing stuff and applying. And so I think my mom early on, she was like, I think Ansley's going to be a veterinarian or a serial killer. I'm not quite sure. So, she's a veterinarian, or whatever. And then but again, just allowing kids to be kids and explore and have fun. And then the after conversation, the debrief about why you can and cannot and the STEM behind it. And I will give my mom credit. If she did not know, she's going to find you a book. She's going, okay, we got a book for you. And back in the day, we had the VHS. We'll put this VHS in and let you learn about it. Yeah.
So parents, there's the key right there. Don't stifle your kids' creativity. It may be crazy. It may sound crazy, but I promise you, it's going to take them somewhere at the end. It's going to take them somewhere. So, Dr. Booker, let's talk about what you have coming up. Let's talk about this.
What do I have coming up? Look, tell me what's on my schedule.
Let's talk about
So this is Real Impact. This is our flyer. And so basically what we have is coming up is we have summer camp. So this is for rising 3rd through 8th grade girls. So on July the 12th through July the 16th, we're going to be drone flying week. That is one of our most exciting camps where you get to learn how to pilot your very own drone. We're also from July the 19th to July the 23rd, we're going to have STEM fashion week. And so again, that's where you learn how to make the LED light up tutus and some really cool stuff. So in the flyer, you can see some of the students kind of working with that, how to make recyclable fashion, fashion that is globally and economically conscious. So I think all this is going to be really, really great. If you can, it's $175 per session, but it's the whole week. And again, we do have COVID guidelines that we will follow and be administered during that time. And then again, if you cannot necessarily afford the tuition price, we do have some scholarships available. But again, it's on a first come, first serve basis. But make sure that you be on the lookout for Real Impact. Registration is open. So please make sure you sign up for a Real Impact camp. And it's from 9 to 3 every day. You get to sleep in for 2 hours, but you'll get a full day of hands-on activity, drone flying, and then STEM Fashion Week.
Awesome. Well, guys, let me tell you, if you're on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, all of her contact information and her description is all listed there for you. So you can reach out to her with her plethora of things that she's got going on. Anyone you're interested in, just look it up and contact her. She'll be more than happy to talk to you about it. Ansley Booker, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm gonna go watch my TED Talk. I need some more views. I'm just kidding.
I know. I put the link for the TED Talk in. All that is there. So just go through it, look at all her stuff, follow her on LinkedIn. And if you have a question or comment, just reach out to her, and she'll be ready to have some conversations with you. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Booker. This has been a great conversation. Shout out to Dr. Woolfolk, Minister Woolfolk. Thank you for watching. We miss you, man. Get back here to Georgia. But if you're in the middle Georgia area, that's where Dr. Booker is. She's in the middle Georgia area, south of Atlanta, in the Macon, Warner Robins area. Look her up. She's phenomenal. If you need somebody to speak for a conference, hit her up. She's phenomenal. You want to talk about STEM in your schools or nonprofit, hit her up. She is phenomenal, and she's phenomenal as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So again, thank you so much. My Mercer alumni, my UGA alumni. I mean, we just get all these connections going.
We just all these connections. Go Dogs, go Bears. We're gonna do all that.
I love it. I appreciate you. Have a good night. Thank you guys for watching. As I always say, be safe, be blessed. And if you can't be your best, then always be
I love it.
Thank you guys.